I saw the devil twice. Has anyone else seen the devil? I have seen it when I was young. I am not sure if what I saw should be called a devil, but that is the only word I can think of to describe it. I firmly believe there must be others who have witnessed this same entity. That is why I want to share my childhood story today. The first time I encountered it was during my 7th autumn. The memory of that evening remains crystal clear, unlike most childhood memories that fade with time. The weather had turned cold early that year. Dead leaves crunched beneath our feet as my mother and I returned from shopping. The setting sun cast long shadows across our neighborhood, stretching the ordinary shapes of trees and houses into unfamiliar silhouettes. Our neighbor, an elderly man, was tending to his garden as usual. He spent most evenings there, carefully maintaining his small vegetable patch even as the growing season came to an end. I remember thinking it strange that he would garden so late, with barely enough light to see. That thought vanished instantly when I noticed what stood behind him. The entity towered over him, its height easily reaching the 2nd story of the nearby houses. Though its basic structure followed human proportions, head, torso, limbs, everything else about it defied natural law. Its arms hung impossibly long, nearly brushing the ground despite its immense height. The fingers extended far beyond normal human length, each digit ending in a point that seemed to fade into shadow. The creature's skin resembled charred wood, but not in a metaphorical sense. It literally looked like burned timber, black, rough, and flaking. When it moved, even slightly, cracks appeared across its surface, revealing nothing but deeper darkness within. These cracks would shift and seal themselves, creating ever-changing patterns that hurt my eyes if I stared too long. The texture reminded me exactly of the remains of a campfire my father had shown me once, that same brittle, ashy quality that would crumble at the slightest touch. But its most terrifying feature was its face, particularly the jaw. Unlike the soft curves of human features, its jaw jutted out like an axe blade, sharp and angular. The edge caught what little sunlight remained, gleaming like polished obsidian. No eyes were visible on its coal-black face, yet I felt its attention like a physical weight. Despite its massive size, the being moved with an eerie slowness that seemed to distort the air around it. It stood hunched over the old man, its impossible frame bent at angles that would shatter human bones. The elderly man continued gardening, humming softly to himself, completely oblivious to the monstrosity looming above him. "Mom," I whispered, tugging at her sleeve. My voice came out smaller than intended, as if the very presence of that thing had stolen the strength from it. "What is that thing behind him?" She paused in unloading groceries, glancing in the direction I pointed. Her expression showed only mild confusion. "What thing?" "There is nothing there, sweetie. Just our neighbor working in his garden." The creature tilted its head at the sound of my voice. The movement caused more cracks to spread across its surface, like a burning log shifting in a fire. Though I could see no eyes, I felt its attention shift from the old man to me. The air grew thick and heavy, as if the atmosphere itself was being compressed by its presence. My mother, unaware of my growing terror, continued bringing bags into our house, the plastic rustling in the evening breeze. That night became an endless exercise in fear. Sleep felt impossible as I lay in bed, my eyes fixed on the window, dreading the possibility of seeing that towering dark figure peering in. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw its cracked, charred surface. New details emerged with each mental replay: how the grass beneath its feet had appeared withered and gray, the way nearby shadows seemed to lean toward it, how the very air wavered around its form like heat distortion above hot pavement. The next morning, my mother woke me up earlier than usual. Her face looked different, worried. She told me that our elderly neighbor had passed away during the night. The news spread through our community quickly. Adults whispered about how peaceful he looked when they found him, as if he had simply decided not to wake up. They said his face showed no sign of distress. His body was not contorted in pain, he had simply stopped breathing sometime in the night. I tried telling my parents about what I had seen. They were deeply religious people, and I thought they might understand, might have some explanation that would make sense of it all. Instead, their reaction only deepened my isolation. My father, usually gentle and patient, became uncharacteristically stern. "It is wrong to lie about such things," he said, his voice hard and unfamiliar. "God does not like children who make up stories about death. What you are doing is disrespectful to our neighbor's memory." My mother nodded in agreement, adding, "Sometimes when sad things happen, our minds can play tricks on us. But we must not let our imagination turn into lies." The following weeks blurred together in a haze of sleepless nights and anxious days. Every shadow caught my attention, every dark corner held potential horrors. The memory of that creature became clearer with each passing day, rather than fading like normal memories should. I began noticing details I had missed in the initial shock: how the air had smelled like burning wood mixed with something metallic, how the temperature had dropped noticeably when it turned its attention toward me, how even the usual evening sounds of birds and insects had fallen silent in its presence. My second encounter with the entity happened a few months later during a school field trip to the local forest. Spring had just begun, and our teacher said we were going to look at trees and collect pretty leaves. I remember being excited because it was our first trip outside school that year. Mom had packed me a special lunch with my favorite sandwich, and the weather was so nice that morning. We were supposed to stay in groups and not go too far from our teacher, but everything looked so interesting that my group kept walking a little further than we should have. The trees were huge, and the sunlight made pretty patterns on the ground through the leaves. I was trying to find the biggest maple leaf I could when something made me stop. Between the trees, far away but still too close, I saw it again. That thing from that awful night. It looked even bigger in the forest, like it could reach up and touch the treetops if it wanted to. Its black body looked wrong against all the green leaves and brown tree trunks. The skin still looked like the charcoal from our summer barbecue, all black and cracked and flaking. When it moved between the trees, it went so slow that it reminded me of watching honey drip from a spoon, except this was terrifying instead of sweet. The creature's long arms nearly touched the ground, even though it was as tall as 3 trees stacked on top of each other. Its fingers were like long black branches, but they moved in ways branches never should. The cracks in its skin seemed deeper in the forest shadows, and sometimes I thought I saw things moving in those cracks, like tiny shadows trying to escape. Its axe blade jaw looked sharper in the daylight. When it turned its head, that sharp edge caught the sun and gleamed like the knife Mom uses for Thanksgiving turkey. I still couldn't see any eyes on its face, but I felt it looking around, like when you know your teacher is watching you during a test even though you're staring at your paper. The birds stopped singing. Even the wind seemed to get quiet. The air felt thick and cold, just like that night months ago. My hands got so shaky that I dropped all my leaves. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then something happened that changed everything. One of my classmates stopped next to me. He was staring at the same spot where the thing was moving between the trees. His hand grabbed my arm so tight it almost hurt. "You see it too," he whispered. That is the devil. My heart felt like it was going to explode. All these months, whenever I tried to tell anyone about what I saw that night with our neighbor, they just said I was making things up or having bad dreams. But here was someone else who could see it too. Looking back now, that moment was both wonderful and terrible. Wonderful because I wasn't crazy or lying like everyone thought, but terrible because if someone else could see it, that meant it was really real. The entity moved again, sliding between two huge pine trees. Its movement made the shadows around it bend the wrong way, like they were trying to touch it. The cracks in its skin spread and sealed themselves as it moved, making patterns that hurt to look at. Where it passed, the grass turned gray and wilted, just like it had in our neighbor's garden. My classmate and I stood frozen, watching it move deeper into the forest. Neither of us said another word. We didn't need to. The thing disappeared behind a cluster of trees, but we kept staring at that spot until our teacher called everyone back together. That night, we heard on the news that a massive forest fire had started in the exact area where we had seen the entity. The fire spread so fast that firefighters had trouble containing it. When I told my parents about seeing the creature in the forest, they got angry again and said I needed to stop making up scary stories. But my classmate and I knew what we had seen. The next day at school, we didn't talk about it directly, but we both kept looking at the smoke rising from the forest in the distance. Sometimes when our eyes met, we shared a look that said more than words could. We both understood that we had witnessed something that wasn't supposed to exist in our world. Years have passed since those encounters, and I have not seen the entity again. Sometimes I wonder if it still walks among us, or if my ability to see it somehow faded with age. But every time I hear about peaceful deaths or unexplained fires, a familiar chill runs down my spine. I cannot help but imagine that charred figure standing nearby, its axe-blade jaw gleaming in the darkness. My classmate from that day moved away the following year. We never really talked about what we saw in the forest, but sometimes I wish I could find him now, just to confirm that shared memory. Though I suppose that is why I am sharing this story today. Perhaps someone else out there has seen it too, that towering figure with skin like burned wood and arms that stretch too long. I still catch myself scanning crowds sometimes, looking above people's heads for that massive dark shape. When I smell burning wood, my heart races for a moment before I remind myself it is just a bonfire or a fireplace. During funerals, I find myself studying the shadows around the mourners, half expecting to see those familiar cracks spreading across a darkness that should not be there. The rational part of my adult mind tries to dismiss these memories as childhood imagination or shared hallucination. But then I remember the specific details, the way nearby shadows seemed drawn to it, how the air grew thick in its presence, the precise texture of its charred skin, the wilting grass beneath its feet. These details have remained razor sharp while other childhood memories have faded to blur. I have never told this story to my own children. When they ask me if monsters are real, I give them the same reassurances all parents do. But sometimes, when I tuck them in at night, I find myself glancing out their windows, checking the shadows of trees against the sky. Just in case.